Okay. Cool. So theoretically, we're good. You good, Josh? You happy there? Sure. I don't know if I can get both sides of the table. Unless you're trying not to be Doc. All right. Less people here today because I think I'm trying to remember if Jackie and Max don't get off at 2 or 2:30 actually.
Oh no, they came in. They went to go get food.
Okay, yeah. That's like it's a long day if they don't. So I'm glad. I'll probably get dinner for us tonight too. Definitely dinner will happen Monday because in celebration of Garen's birthday and mine's this Friday tomorrow. So that's exciting. Woo.
And it's the food, isn't it?
Yeah, so I will probably have a long day anyway, so it'll be good to have foodstuffs. Okay, cool. So I guess we'll put some of this up there for some helping. Let's see. Thanks. All right, so I'm gonna get to the place where. All right, so again, we're going off of Yukai Chow's gamification model. Today we're going to dig into those core drives. We started talking about ethic, meaning, and calling last time. We also got into development and accomplishment, and there's a lot embedded into D&D that already has that sense of development and accomplishment, and so we had looked at some of the narrative possibilities. Just to get a summary, and I am going to borrow from GPT a little bit here. Let me just make sure that that's going to be coming through on that. Yeah, I'd feel it. That's better that way anyways. So let's do that. Something like that. That second core drive, development and accomplishment, is about the intrinsic motivation derived from personal growth, progress, and achievement of goals. So that drive taps into the satisfaction and pride that come from overcoming challenges, leveling up, and mastering new skills. And then it gives the example. So I basically had it summarize his key points because GPT's cool like that. So the next one we're going to dig into, did I say it was empowerment? Yeah. So empowering creativity, this is allowing users to express their creativity and see the results of their creativity. And to be more specific, it focuses on engaging individuals by allowing them to use their creativity, experiment with different strategies, and see immediate feedback on their actions. And so this can be both good and bad. And there's this example here. And then I'll just get rid of this now. I'm going to I'll just put the regular hand, the big hand up there. And I'll mute this. So one of the things with empowerment and creativity is that there's this, whatever system, when you're setting up a game, that there is response. And so this core drive of empowerment and creativity and feedback is that core value that fights against games that talk about things like railroading. And so if a DM is set on their plot and they have basically decided ahead of time what the players are going to do, the players don't have a sense of empowerment, or another fancy word is like agency. So they don't feel like they have decision-making power in the world. What up, Zach? Feeling better? I had to get a Z-Pack earlier this week, if that makes you feel any better. Did you have to do antibiotics?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a thing. It's a weird season. So, with the core drive of empowerment and creativity, it is how many ways can I give players something to respond to? And so, when a DM sets up any game, we've talked about this in other ways. I've shared like my 30-second to 1 minute rule. Like a DM, it's best if a DM can kind of keep narration to under a minute because then it gives and look for specific kind of calls to action for the players. So something that they can respond to. And so let's talk. What's an example in a game where you did this for a player, or Max and Jackie? Oh. What's an example where you've kind of left the table open? You guys don't have to sit over there. I think Zach just sat over there. You guys can sit over here, but you don't have to sit over there. Find your happy place.
I don't know where to sit anymore.
Just find your happy place. No one's.
I guess I'm here now.
You belong everywhere in this room, and it's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You should take the table.
Except behind the camera.
You sit directly next to it. Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be fine. My wife might get a little jealous, but not too much.
You should be here then.
Well, that's a valid point. I'll let you tell her that. How about that?
Never met your wife. Oh wait, actually, didn't she briefly?
Yeah. So she is, and I think I've told you, she's as introverted as I am extroverted, and so yeah. And Thursday's usually her like calm day, but she's come in really quick to like drop off
That's
snacks
what I was gonna say. No,
Yeah.
actually, we have seen her in the past.
or bring candy. Yeah, she does that every now and then.
I feel in good spirit with her now because I get
Yeah, so it's one of those things like so we're looking at the core drive of empowerment and creativity and feedback. And when we say feedback, it's not like in a class feedback where you like give each other commentary. It's more like feedback response, like in a system, computer system style. Like if I press a button, something happens. That's what we're talking about. So when a DM sets up a scenario, we want to make sure we constantly give our players things to respond to because we don't know what they're going to want to respond to. So we want to only give them enough narrative, or we want to try and aim for giving them just enough narrative so that they have a couple options to choose from, and it's clear that we kind of let the game kind of hold until they decide to do something. And so some parts of allowing empowerment on the part of the players or the characters on the part of the players is that like the DM has to be able to close their mouths, which I struggle with, obviously, but as a hyperverbal processor. But this is a common struggle, and sometimes, especially new DMs, struggle with this even more because they're afraid of silence. They think that it means people aren't having fun. So just bless your face. And your little nose too. I don't know. Just kidding. I think that was a cough. I don't know. Yeah.
It happens a lot.
So, I'm going to go professory on this just because it's a cognitive thing. So, and I tell this to teachers too when they're asking questions in class. So I'm sorry if this gets a little too cerebral, as I've been told I can be sometimes. But when we ask a question, so if we're like, so what do you guys want to do? So when we ask a table, what do you want to do? We just set up a scenario. There's goblins, there's a ghost, there's something. They hear a creepy noise. When we say, so what do you want to do? If you're nervous about your role as a DM, it can be really tempting to suddenly fill that space. To be like, I knew what question I was going to ask, and give like 3 seconds of gap before allowing someone to, and then kind of cutting people off before they really have a chance. So just to free people up, it's good to remember that if you ask a question, the other person needs cognitive processing time at a basic fundamental language level first, and that always takes 3 to 5 seconds. Then, if they're new to D&D or if they're still trying to get a sense of how their character would work through this, silence around the table doesn't mean nothing's happening. There's a lot of, when we're role playing, there are decisions to be made and choices to be weighed and consequences to value. And so if just because your players aren't immediately responding when you set up an exigency or something for them to respond to, doesn't mean that anything bad is happening. So it's okay to let the silence sit for 10 or 15 seconds. If you look around and it's clear people understood the question and had a chance to think about how to respond and still seem stuck, you can ask follow-up questions, or you can add one more nugget of detail. Sometimes those are strategies. But let's have me talk less. And so what are some times when you were playing where something like that happened, or when you've been running a game and you either struggled to let the players kind of have their moments? What does that look like in games you've played or been a DM for?
I don't know. For me, I'll just wait. I know, like, people take time to think. I'll sit there and wait, and if it takes too long, I'll start offering suggestions on things that they could do.
Yeah. Who here has had DMs suggest things and that felt nice? It kind of freed them up when they were stuck as a player. Yeah.
Yeah.
I sometimes, especially with new players, I'll make sure that I'll set a table rule so they don't feel bad asking. And so what I'll do is I'll set a table rule, especially for new players, that is, if you as a player are stuck on what your character would do here, you can just tell us, and what we'll do is we'll have your character roll a wisdom check. And you always get one possible hint from the DM. So if you roll a 0 to 5, it's basically for every 5, the DM will give you one hint of a possible choice you could make if you just feel completely stuck. So new players who are still trying to figure things out, if they roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then I'll be like, you said your character's this kind of thing, right? So would they want to do this? And sometimes just deciding a yes or a no on a really simple, straightforward question is enough. And if they roll like an 18 or a 20 or something, then it's like, well, you could try this, you could try this, or you could try this. And that's just intrinsically part of your character's wisdom and like who they are. And so that's one of my my table special rules that I do to let players know that if they can't think of something, that doesn't mean the game just stops. It's like, and they aren't stuck with just what they have. What are some other instances where this has kind of come up in your own games, where how do you give your players, or how have DMs given you the chance to kind of take ownership, or not ownership, to kind of be able to act and have an immediate response in world? Like, what are some parts of D&D where that can happen?
I know when I ran for your class last week, I tried to set the scene up first, and I kind of gave them their mission first. Then I kind of narrated the world, and then I let them go. So I gave them kind of a couple of arrows, just to probably want to do this, and I set it up like that, just to let them think about it for a little longer before I let them out into the world.
So what were a couple of the plot hooks you gave them?
Well, so the first was just the call to action. Hey, someone's been kidnapped. Can you help rescue them? So they would respond yes, and then I sent them into the world, kind of explained what was going on around them, gave them a few plot points, like asking people around town what might have happened, or I gave them kind of an obvious, oh, there are guards talking in front of the temple where the person would have been kidnapped.
And so that gives them a chance to maybe they can interrogate the guards,
Yeah,
or accuse the guards.
Yeah.
Yeah. What'd they end up doing?
They ended up, approaching the guards, but the guards left, and they talked to the man who had been conversing with the guards about what had happened that night.
Cool. Yeah. Jackie, were you saying that the question was weird, or what were you saying?
I asked if you could repeat the question.
So the question was, when in games as a player or DM, have you seen players empowered or seen them able to do something and have kind of an immediate in-game response? Because empowerment, it's about that I did something and it caused a reaction. That's what empowerment and creativity is like. I have power to manipulate the world, the fabric of existence in this tiny little thing. So when did that happen in your... aside from someone stealing,
I was about to say, it was like Max cursed himself.
aside from choosing to attune to two cursed items, we should stop. But yeah, that's an easy one.
Other people picked up demon items. They weren't cursed.
They didn't attune to them without checking first.
Sometimes it's just the luck of the draw.
Yeah. Sorry. But yeah, there's
Let's have a nice skeleton glowy arm together.
I do that, yeah.
I was gonna say, when I was running a campaign for like my brothers and stuff, they had just gotten through like a labyrinth and everything, and they were like, there was like nothing at the end of it.
Is David Bowie there?
I will
Well
say
played,
I did
well
kind of face the thing that they meant at the end of it. So, kind of, yeah. And like they had a couple of like choices that they could have made like with the like thing, and like regardless of what they like chose, it was like a different like outcome that could have happened. So like afterwards they were like, this felt like we were setting up for like they read the cats, and I was like, maybe.
Yeah.
And like kind of like told them some of the other things that could have happened, and they were like, wow, that's cool. You're such a good DM. You should always DM. And you don't want to play ever again, right? You just want to DM.
the forever DM.
Yeah.
Don't gaslight your DM. What the heck?
That's pretty much what happened. They're like, you're just like really good.
You are so good at this. Can you just like always be in that one role?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
That's why, obviously.
Yeah. And you know what? Actually, that makes me think about like how this applies for problem players. Because with this, like, it's the positive framing that he gives for gamification is in this piece is empowerment, right? Being able to affect the world is kind of cool. On it from a DM side, it's that traditional, like, every decision has consequences. Some of those consequences are good, some of those consequences are bad. And so when you set up a scenario, if you have players who are kind of in, say, a murder hobo mode, and they're going around killing everybody, like their empowerment, their ability to affect the world in a negative way is really coming out. And so it's not wrong to bring the city guard in force and mass to go and take care of this group that's killing everybody. And so if they're affecting the world, it's actually letting them not have enough empowerment, because in any context, killing 5, 10 random whatevers is going to have some sort of context, because whether if or some sort of repercussion. Sorry. And so it can be a really important part of helping them understand that their actions do have response, because otherwise they'll go around and they'll just keep this up because it doesn't feel like it matters. The things don't have value, which also means the decisions they're making, they're not having to weigh. It's like, oh, kill, get gold. Actually, do you guys know the history of oh gosh, what's the name of was it the original like Avatar game from the 90s? There's like an ARS Technica history on this game. So there was a computer game design from the 90s where at one point they had a bunch of like critters. You could go out into nature and farm and kill a bunch of critters, get their skins, get their pelts. And they tried to design this algorithm so that it felt like a natural way of that the what are they called when things spawn? What's it called in Minecraft when you produce animals?
Breed or
Breeding
breeding
or reproduce.
Something like that, yeah. So
spawning.
it's just spawning, isn't it?
Yeah.
But what are they called?
Mobs.
Mobs. So they had these like critters, these mobs that would spawn. I'm sorry, my brain twitched for a minute there. They would have these mobs that would spawn, and they had this. They like thought they had perfected the algorithm. Well, what players, when they first did the beta test on it, they went in and they just killed everything to where nothing was left, and they'd sit and they just wipe out the entire ecology that these coders spent so much time finding the perfect balance for and stuff. And so when players get into that mode, they're seeing there's no consequences to these actions, and so I'm not really having to think about it. I can kind of get into this grind mode where I'm just getting resources and stuff. And so every time I see a goblin, just immediately hack off their head. It doesn't matter if it's a kid, doesn't matter if they've renounced and gone over to some other faith or whatever. And so having moments like that where empowerment means I empowered you to do something wrong in my book, but that also means that thing in game has consequences, and that's part of the story. So if they become murder hobos, you can shut that down without necessarily being like a bad DM. You can say those things have consequences. The natural repercussion of you killing a goblin in the middle of town square, maybe you get praise from some people, but maybe that rumor spreads, but now you've got a horde, an entire sets of tribes of goblins like chasing you down. Or if it's something, maybe it's peasants or farmers, whatever it is, right? If there's no telling, there's no saying that there wasn't a bird of, Saruman or whatever watching, some spy of some wizard who found out. And you could make a percentile die roll every couple times, that they do this. So, yeah. When's a time when you didn't feel like your DM, or when you struggled as a DM? When was a time where empowerment didn't seem to happen in the game? For you, any of you? What's the story you got?
Remember the answer? I don't know.
Is it bad question or no answer?
I don't know.
Okay. So
are you like asking like basically like a time when they were railroaded or?
yeah. So when was a time you didn't feel like the decisions you were making were having an impact, or that your DM wasn't honoring your character decisions? Like you kept it, or do you have a story of this? I kept trying to get my character to do this, but the DM kept having this happen instead.
I don't know if I've had that issue.
Not on any large scale or anything.
What up, Hunter?
Hello.
Maybe the
How's it
occasional,
going?
odd
Oh,
decision,
good.
but
Well, that's good. That means you've had well-balanced DMs, so that's
All
cool.
right.
How's it going, Hunter? Thank you again for Saturday. Appreciate you
Oh,
showing up and being
No
there.
problem.
Cool. So,
well, sometimes you can railroad things without them realizing
I've done that.
That's very. So tell me how. So what does it feel like to make them? So what's the strategy you use to give them a sense of empowerment while still moving the plot forward? Actually, that's a good balancing.
All roads lead to home, basically.
Yeah.
Like, all the role, they all lead to the same place.
Eventually, no matter what they do, they'll end up getting to where I want them to go. Because I'm God. I'm in charge.
The
So-
illusion of choice, pretty much.
How do you make them feel empowered while still getting them where you kind of have thought
I
they
don't
need to
tell
go?
them where I'm trying to get them.
Okay, don't reveal too early because then
Yeah.
either that's a
They'll
good
be
point.
like, oh, okay, we decided to do this side quest, and somehow that also seems to be at the same place that we
Literally,
were
all of
supposed
these
to.
are red ones.
Actually, that's interesting. Yeah, I had a player say this, a newer player say this a month or so ago, and they said it was something along the lines of like he was like kind of the dad of the group, and so there was a dad. It's a dad, mom, grandpa, and neighbor, and like two teenage boys. And so the dad of the group is like, but we don't want to like get off track from what his like the story he's planned is. We need to make him accomplish this mission. Did you just make a mess?
It's not that bad.
No, it's just a couple of greens, Bryce.
Sure. Today, but tomorrow it grows.
Tomorrow is the whole enchilada.
It's the whole motherfucker.
Yeah. So, but he said this. He was like,
Then you
I
do
was-
it a second time.
I think I had set it up as like, so it was one of those like, so where do you guys want to go next? Like, how do you want to proceed, kind of things. And he was counseling the other players, like they were in mid debate about some of them in character, some of them as players. And he said this thing to the table, like, but we don't want to mess up his story. Like, we want to make sure we're accomplishing the arc. And I'm like, so I had to kind of, there was a moment where I had to go, whoa, hold on. And it was like that teaching the table, like, I don't have a set, like, you guys, that this is just one option, right? And so, because sometimes I guess if players get into the mindset of there's a target, sometimes they're like, they beeline it for the target in world, or they try and get everybody to do that.
I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, you have your
If I want to play the main story, I want to play the main
yeah.
story.
Yeah, and it's like it's just making sure they're not doing it because they like different people like different personalities. Like some are like if they're a rule following player personality, they're like they don't want to displease the DM, you know, that kind of thing. So sometimes you have to empower them as players to go against what they think you have planned.
You know, I have no issue with pleasing the DM.
I that's why I said there are different personalities. And then there are others that are like, whatever. This is also the other danger is if you reveal where you want them to go, some players will naturally find whatever I do what I want mentality of Cartman, right?
I don't want to go there now that you've mentioned it.
Oh, that's where you're leading us? Well, fine then. And then every step is a fight. I've only had you. So this will be the last question because I know I told David I'd try and end at 3.
No, you're good. I mean, we're waiting on Cody still, so
Are
I'm
you?
just going to give him like 10, 15.
Okay, cool. Well, so it does lead me to think when we're talking about empowerment of players, what happens when players around the table have different ideas about where they should go and they can't come? Like, how do you mitigate players thinking their characters would go in different directions? What does it look like, or what have DMs done for you in the past?
Kind of have them like give them more time to discuss amongst each other and decide as the party what the best course of action is instead of everyone splitting up and being like, nah, I'm gonna do my own thing, because then, well, it's gonna get annoying for everyone, because for the other players of just sitting around waiting for your turn, and the DM of having to might as well be doing like 3 or 4 separate different campaigns just for one person.
Yeah, that can be splitting the party can be tough, and yeah, some days it is necessary to kind of give everybody a 15-minute window, especially if it's like a downtime type session where it's like we want to make sure that your character has a moment. But trying to balance that, like how do I make sure characters feel like or players feel like they get influence, but then what happens when they don't? I had an instance where I was doing a play-by-post on D&D Beyond. Like I was running a campaign for it was like 6 months. And at one point, one of the players had jumped in and they found a hole in the ground basically. And I knew it led to the underworld, or to the Underdark, sorry. And some grit. Oh gosh, what are they called? The blind, true sight things, they got gray faces and no eyes, and they come from down below. Grix, Grims, Grill, oh gosh, I can't remember.
I don't know.
Anyway, suffice to say, they started trying to go down this hole, but they didn't light a torch, and they were halflings, so they don't have dark vision. And so,
Rookie mistake.
so like I wasn't trying to like, but the rest of the party was doing some other stuff. They were like exploring the local area or like investigating because they were trying to figure out where a dead body had come from. And this person saw the hole and wanted to go down the hole, which was a legitimate like tied in plot line. But after like 3 skill checks that were just kind of low and the player not really doing anything to like help the fact that they couldn't see, it made it really hard for them to like find their way in a series of caves. And so they got frustrated and was like, okay. And they probably I felt bad after the fact because this was early when I was first starting DMing. I felt bad because I felt like they thought I was trying to railroad them, but they just had bad checks and they weren't like doing something in the game. So they weren't getting any response from the world, except that like if you go into a dark hole with no light and no vision, you're gonna stumble around. And I felt like I had to be true to that, but then they didn't feel like what they were doing was getting anywhere. So
As somebody with perpetually low rolls, they can just deal.
yeah, I was like 3 under 10 rolls and like
Ouch.
because they couldn't see, it was like with disadvantage for perception, and I just So it was one of those. I'm like, that was one of those where I'm like, should I have? And I still to this day, I'm like, should I have fudged something there, or should I have like made it just work? But yeah, so I know that player probably felt. I could tell in the way that they were writing the responses back that they felt a little disappointed. But the rest of the party, they ended up continuing on, and the party had fun and stuff like that. But it was just one of those moments.
Disappointment is a part of the game.
Yeah. So how do you, as a DM, or how have you seen DMs do? How do you balance when other players have different things they want to do? How do you balance that out around the table? How do you negotiate that as a player or as a DM? Bribe them. So you like in game, like I'll give you 50 gold pieces to walk with me, or what do you mean?
Either way, somehow.
Yeah, either the player or the
I-
character.
We'll get this
I
working somehow.
generally try to just go along with whatever the party's doing because half the time because I have a bit of a bad habit of when I'm a player, sometimes I zone out, so I forget what's going on. So I'm just like, all right, I'll just go along with what everyone's doing. I'm like, wait, we're gonna be drop kicking orphans? What?
Sounds like a good plan.
Suboptimal choices. But yeah, okay. What else does this make? So there's one of the solutions for this is not. It feels a little more railroady, but because if you are trying to lean into empowerment, you do have to let them kind of have that battle around the table. However, like part of looking at it as a whole system and seeing that there are a variety of core drives means that sometimes this one's not going to be the one you have to emphasize. So there are places in the game, and there's plenty of moments in the game, if you're careful, that you can give players a chance to feel empowerment, to feel like what they do has a response in world. And then other times when it's clear that the tempo around the table has stagnated, stalemated, whatever it is, and nobody's making a decision, and it's kind of cycling. What's that when you? Yeah,
So-
that you're kind of cycling down, swirling down the drain. When that happens, like it's okay to go to be like, well, I have to kind of let go of the empowerment drive because it can't rule every decision as a DM because nobody's having fun here. It's been 10 minutes of the same kind of counterpoint point situation. So you say instead something happens that maybe you allow both possibilities to suddenly come in. So if they're arguing around a campfire at night and the players are taking too long to make a decision, well, is there something in world that had happened that would justify them being attacked at the camp suddenly? Or is there a third option that they didn't think of because they've been arguing about these other two that you can now introduce to add a little chaos? But now they have, maybe it ties to larger epic meaning and calling. Maybe it is maybe it is a random encounter. And so you roll a percentile die and you give your, say there's a 50-50 chance. However long maybe it's like every 5 minutes of argument that's been going on, the percentile of a random encounter raises because you imagine them around the campfire and the voices are getting more like louder and less and more obnoxious, and it's starting to feed into the surrounding. Does that make sense? So then that can be a thing where it's like, well, you guys couldn't make a decision. You were arguing heatedly and for an extended period of time. So then that's a great place to use some of the the sand timers I have in there, like set the 2-minute one. And when that goes off, make a percentile die roll. And maybe the first one's 25%. Then you set another 2-minute timer and then it's 50%. Then it's 75. And if they make it, 15 or however, 10 minutes of this arguing, then all right, random encounter kind of happened. And then you can just write that in.
I love real-time events.
Hmm?
I said I love real-time events.
Yes,
I
yeah.
put them in like every like long campaign, right? I love using real-time for stuff.
Yeah. And so we'll talk more about that in the core drive of scarcity and patience, because that's where that kind of plays in. Also, because having that kind of, you guys clearly have something counting down here, even if you don't know what it is. So that sense that time is scarce, both in game and out of game, suddenly raises the stakes. Like, we've got to do something here. And so that's one of the reasons why I really like thinking about gamification with these 8 multiple facets here that we can kind of play with. Yeah. So with that, that's kind of that's empowerment of creativity and feedback. Here, I'll put this back up on the screen just as a closeout. Did I do that right? No, I did it wrong. All right, press the other button. And so the short version of that is it's about allowing users to express their creativity and see the results of their creativity. To use a more elaborate summary. Let me just slide this over so it's not. Yeah, that's fine. So again, this core drive, empowerment of creativity and feedback, focuses on engaging individuals by allowing them to use their creativity, experiment with different strategies, and the important thing, see immediate feedback of their actions. Like, that's really what this core drive is about. That I do something, it's like the little kid syndrome or the little kid response. It's like when a kid bops something and it makes a squeaky noise, like that suddenly is a thing that teaches them, and their brain fires in all different ways. So that's what we want to see with this core drive. So yeah, immediate feedback on their actions. By sometimes this is, and a lot of times this leans more into offering a sandbox environment where players can test hypotheses or see the possible outcomes of different experiments. If you really wanted to lean into it, it could be that maybe their actions have short-term consequences, but then there's like a time swap and then they get to try again. Like, that could be a really fun way to do this based on thinking like that super sandbox, but that could be pushing this a little far. But ultimately it's that a little more sandbox environment, because it's what do they want to do and what happens, how does the world respond to them? So you have to be prepared with responses. So if you're good at thinking on the fly, that can be great, but this is one of the harder parts of DMing if you aren't prepared, because having the empowerment and creativity, having this sense of immediate feedback, you have to be ready to respond. And that is more challenging because it may not line up with your prep, or you have to find a way to prep so that you have multiple avenues to respond to. Does that make sense? That makes sense. Okay. All right, so we'll call that good for this one, and then we'll move on to our normal sessions of gameplay.